I recently watched Kissing is the Easy Part, and well, it was a watch. It was kind of cute, kind of corny. Walking into it, I kept my expectations pretty low because of one main reason. It was a Wattpad, Webtoon Studio, and Blue Eyes Pictures production. And that's kind of a running gag, isn't it? To watch a Wattpad movie or a movie based on fanfiction and to automatically know that it's not going to be anything spectacular. We walk in ready to clown them. And you know what? It's not like that's without reason. Kissing is the Easy Part holds a 6 out of 10 star rating on IMDb. Love Me, another Wattpad Studios production, holds a 4.2. Sideline, The QB and Me has a 5.8. Sideline 2, Intercepted, a 5.4. Boot Camp, a 5.7. Mala Influencia, a 4.2. Copa Mia, a 6.1. After has a 5.3, and literally every single After sequel has a 4.8. I could go on. Obviously, these ratings don't mean everything. Everyone's taste varies. But the fact that Wattpad originals have this reputation of being lowbrow, deeply unserious media is something that's always been so curious to me. Because if lowbrow, deeply unserious media, then why bother making them in the first place? And why bother making them your brand? Now me, I'm an avid consumer of fanfiction. It's me, AO3, and the cool side of my pillow against the world at 3 a.m. I've read some of the most toe-curling, gut-wrenching, gorgeously written prose in my entire life on that website, and I am forever grateful for its existence. I've never been much of a Wattpad girl, but I respect my ancestors, so I stand in solidarity with my Wattpad warriors and fanfiction.net family. Thank y'all. All that said, both of these platforms, AO3 or its government name, Archive of Our Own, and Wattpad have a combined 170 million users, with 160 million of those coming from Wattpad alone. They serve the purpose of allowing folks to publish and read original works of fiction, and oftentimes those works are based off of other works of intellectual property or IP. Fanfiction has long been a key element of fan spaces or fandoms, and it's always been, at least to me, one of the best parts about engaging with fellow fans and building community. And also, it doesn't hurt that this stuff is free, though Wattpad has been getting very weird about that. But yeah, fanfiction is great. It can also be very terrifying, but I mind my business and keep scrolling. My biggest gripe with the existence of Wattpad Studios is the most basic of basic gripes. This was supposed to be fun.
No one's fun anymore. Whatever happened to fun? God.
I'm not saying that the movies they make aren't, but the biggest pull for platforms like Wattpad is the fact that writers are making this stuff for the enjoyment of themselves and others, and like I mentioned, for free. Whether it's writing original characters, OCs, or contributing to a fandom, there's an understood unity in doing these things for fun. Works like those created on Wattpad are crafted under the guise of someone wanting to connect with others and get their words out there and maybe just enjoy a bit of escapism. Sure, some people might write under the pretense of gaining readers, but even then, they're putting in the time and effort to have that happen. Again, for free. Now, what happens when you take a multi-billion-dollar industry that's always hungry for some fresh IP and throw it into the mix? We stop having fun. Or rather, the fun that was had starts feeling like now it's being had at the expense of those that these adaptations are supposedly made for. Removing these stories from their community-based, serialized formats and putting them into the rigid frameworks of a standard Hollywood film feels awkward. It feels like we're putting a polar bear in Arlington, Texas. As a part of my major, I've taken multiple screenwriting classes, and through them, I've learned that films are expected to be 3 acts, follow the same beats, and have those anticipatory moments that audience members can identify as part of a winning formula. It's not the case for every movie, of course, but those that are looking to appeal to a wide audience and garner their studios a little bit of money follow the beaten path. And that's the thing, isn't it? Fanfiction and original stories like those published on Wattpad are quite well known for implementing well-worn tropes, like bad boy meets innocent girl, rags to riches, enemies to lovers, love at first sight, slow burn romance, found family, your family sells you to One Direction, Omegaverse, a billion and one others. I mean, that's kind of what these stories are loved and known for. They're the selling points, much like the cliches and tropes that books and movies market themselves with. One of the big differences between these mediums, though, is the structure. When it comes to fanfiction, there's a wide net that's cast, like 5+1s, which are when the fact that I'm explaining this, okay, which are when there's 5 scenarios and 1 reversal of that same scenario. For example, 5 times character A said I love you to character B, 1 time character B said it back to character A. And then you have multi-chapter fics, which contain multiple chapters, and one-shots, which are the opposite of multi-chapter fics in that they're just one big story contained in one chapter. And then there are plenty of others, I'm sure. When looking at original stories that are structured at the whim and will of the author, we encounter an even wider variety of formatting. Take Kissing is the Easy Part, for example. It's 66 chapters plus the sequel, has a read time of 15 hours and 53 minutes, and is over 100,000 words. To put it simply, it's a sprawling work. It goes everywhere and for good reason. It's what the author felt like doing, and it's what the readers felt like reading. The same goes for Sideline, which is 45 chapters, has an epilogue, 13 bonus chapters, and an alternate storyline. I'm not going to assert the claim that these stories are just free-for-alls. I'm sure that the authors had some structure that made sense to them, but the key takeaway here is just that. It makes sense to them. These stories are for them. So when you try to translate them to film, you hit a wall because I genuinely think that there's a certain level of untranslatability that lives within the space between these stories and their film adaptations. That brings me to my biggest point. The context that these stories were written in is fundamentally erased when you bring them to a big or usually small screen. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to die on the hill that is trying to convince y'all that these movies are secretly super good because, well,
Fucking dreadful!
Nor am I trying to convince y'all that Wattpad originals or fan fiction should be compared to Shakespeare's folios. No, some of my bookmarks go absolutely crazy. Billy Boy doesn't have shit on them. But I do think that they should be acknowledged as contributing to their designated communities and fan bases in ways that were specifically made for Wattpad. This brings me back to the point that I was making before with context, and I'll illustrate it with After in the Kissing Booth. In 2013, 24-year-old Anna Todd, under the username Imaginator1D, published the first chapter of After, a story about the innocent, fresh-faced college student Tessa Young falling for campus bad boy Harry Styles. To say that this fic was huge is an understatement. It has over 1 billion reads on Wattpad and a word count of over 1 million, and 295 chapters across all 3 books. Like, Todd was publishing a new chapter daily, and it was a hit. The girls were eating it up. Now, clearly, its big draw is the fact that After is One Direction fanfiction. And my God, 2013 One Direction, there was mass hysteria everywhere you looked. The band formed on X Factor 3 years prior and was absolutely meteoric in their rise to fame. And plus, in 2013, they dropped Midnight Memories, which had banger after banger after banger. So yeah, people writing fanfiction about One Direction was nothing out of the ordinary, especially self-insert fanfiction, which, yeah, I won't even get into that right now, or the ethics of writing fanfiction about real people and then making a movie about that in which that real person might see it, and thus it breaks its containment. But what I do know is that people were blinking their blue orbs and throwing their dirty blonde hair up into messy buns while they read books at One Direction concerts, okay? Harry Styles was also considered to be the bad boy of the group, which I genuinely never understood. But then again, I was a mindless behavior in 5 seconds of summer kind of girl, so I don't know. Fun fact, actually, my dad was the one that put me on to One Direction's music because he would constantly blast You and I whenever we were in the car. Anyways, I'm getting off track. The point is that after becoming a huge success on Wattpad, it catapulted it to becoming a published New York Times bestselling book. And then in 2019, a movie adaptation in which Harry Styles' name was changed from Harry Styles to Hardin Scott. The movie was panned, with critics calling it a dumpster fire, a lifeless slog of thinly written cliches, and remarkably horny and corny to the point of embarrassment. And while the original fanfiction was widely read and garnered Anna Todd a lot of success, it also polarized readers in terms of quality. Some people were obsessed, but others absolutely loathed it, especially given the toxicity of Hardin, and Tessa's relationship, alongside the debatable quality of the penmanship. Todd openly admitted to not planning out the story, but rather just typing and posting. She said she barely even reread chapters before uploading them. And that makes sense. After was one of thousands of stories about One Direction on Wattpad and existed in a low-stakes environment where you write whatever you want. And so, with all of that in mind, does it make for a good or even logical movie? Well, of course not. That same sentiment can be given to The Kissing Booth. It started in 2010 as a Wattpad original story written by Beth Riekels, who was 15 years old at the time of writing it. The story follows Rochelle Evans, a high schooler who's never been kissed. She runs a kissing booth and subsequently ends up in a messy relationship with bad boy, are we sensing a pattern, Noah Flynn, her best friend's older brother. It is a lot. I tried my hardest to find the original fanfiction, but it's been wiped from the internet, though I did find this Reddit post that details one of the later plot points in which Elle finds out that she's pregnant because her and Noah were having sex in the school library when an earthquake hit and a table fell on her, which caused her to end up in the hospital.
Yeah, right.
The Kissing Booth was actually published by Penguin Random House before coming out as a film in 2018, and though not technically a Wattpad Studios production, it has to be mentioned here because, come on, this movie was the talk of the town for a hot minute. The Kissing Booth launched Jacob Elordi's career, and the movie and its sequels were massively successful for Netflix. As popular as the original work was, with its 20 million reads on Wattpad within the first 2 years of it being on the platform, the film was genuinely a mega hit. It garnered 18 million views in its first week alone and 46 million by week 2. Critically, though, it, much like After, was panned. Reviews were as follows. It feels like it was written by someone who simply digested everything she was told romance was supposed to be by the patriarchy and vomited it back at us. I can confirm that it is not a good film. In fact, its themes are at times unsettling. And The Kissing Booth's troubling treatment of the female body and unrealistic representation of high school hinders its ability to accomplish anything meaningful. And just like with After, though widely read, the original version of The Kissing Booth was given similar criticisms, all of which makes sense when we realize that this story was written by a teenager who made it for fun and, yeah, was likely vomiting up the recycled tropes that Wattpad is notorious for. When studios attempt to translate this distinctly tailor-made for Wattpad story into a Netflix original, there's a gap that simply cannot be bridged because it was never meant to be. Film critics were never meant to be watching this in earnest because, to me, this movie couldn't be made in earnest. You can't subtract Wattpad as a community or environment from the story and have it stand on 2 legs. There's a Jezebel article that I read that makes this point for me very well. Quote, I learned that The Kissing Booth was adapted from an original story published to Wattpad by Beth Riegels, a 15-year-old living in Wales. No wonder the stilted construction reminded me of another surprising smash, 2019's After. These movies are teen fantasies written for teens, by teens, or young 20-somethings in the case of Todd, meant to be enjoyed and not considered, to go down easy without a second thought, unless, of course, that thought is, let's watch this again. They are ostensibly criticism-proof. The article goes on to say, the main charm of fan fiction and amateur authorship, the work that gets the most clicks on Wattpad, is its accessibility. These self-publishing formats exist outside of traditional media. It's not meant to be reviewed in conventional spaces for an audience that values insightful criticism. It is a self-sustaining engine separate from traditional industry and studio systems until it racks up so much popularity that Netflix sees the potential, signs the deal, and exposes millions more to the niche world. When those same stories turn into hit movies or franchises, it's clear that popularity does not correspond to value, but of a different kind, monetary value. And that's just it. These were folks that wrote these stories for free in their spare time and are admittedly not the best. Throwing them to film and opening them up to the world of non-Wattpad people feels kind of sinister and extraordinarily money hungry because who needs a 1 million plus word count Harry Styles fanfic as a movie? And who needs a story that a 15-year-old wrote that glamorizes and romanticizes toxic relationships and gross behavior? I mean, the obvious answer is the one I just said, money. But money at the cost of automatically damning all the movies that bear your logo? Because yeah, these movies are critically panned and the works that they're derived from are quite divisive. But like I mentioned, if you take a polar bear and put it in Arlington, Texas, it's not going to make much sense. These works make sense on Wattpad because they were made for the hell of it, for people like them. And now you got RogerEbert.com reviewing it. Like, my God, this is not how things are supposed to be. And look, I know these movies are still going to be made, but I don't know. I just find it unfortunate that Wattpad Studios has built its brand on making bad movies when the stories that they're adapting aren't made for that purpose. They're escapism. I've said it 17 million times throughout this video. They're for fun. And no, it's not exploitation of these young authors' work because ultimately they took that check. But when they wrote those stories in their bedrooms, they weren't thinking about money or film adaptation. They were thinking about community. And I'm not trying to go to bat for One Direction fanfiction, but it's just telling that instead of settling for that reaction of, oh my gosh, I love reading Wattpad. Wattpad fanfiction was all the rage when I was a kid. Wattpad Studios now exists to make you groan whenever they announce a new project. But hey, that green machine never sleeps, does it? So yeah, that was this video. Thank you so very much for watching. I actually really enjoyed making this. I had a very fun time trying to find the old fanfics like in their original forms, because After is not in its original form on Wattpad anymore. It has Harden instead of Harry. And I was like, bruh, this is not the OG. If you are a fan fiction enjoyer, if you are an original works enjoyer, please let me know in the comments. I love finding my community. Yeah. Thanks so much for watching. This isn't a sign to not enjoy corny bad movies, because I love corny bad movies, but it is a sign for Wattpad Studios to start considering, is its base film or is it the people that made your website what it is? You know what I mean? Anyways, I digress. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.